AITA for refusing to let my mom live with me after she kicked me out of her house when I was 18. I, 28F, have a complicated relationship with my mom, Linda, 50s. Growing up, I was always the responsible one in the family. My parents divorced when I was around 12, and I ended up taking on a lot of the household responsibilities, like cooking, cleaning, and making sure my younger brother, now 22, didn't get into too much trouble. My mom worked long hours, and my dad was around, but didn't really take on much responsibility after they separated. It was always me who had to step up and manage things at home. I never really minded doing this, but looking back, it's clear that my mom was very controlling and often emotionally manipulative. I wasn't allowed to go to parties or sleepovers unless I got perfect grades. If I made any mistake or did something she didn't like, she would punish me by taking away my privileges or make me feel incredibly guilty about it. As a result, I learned to keep my head down and avoid confrontation. I would just do what she asked to keep the peace. When I was 18, I got accepted into college about 3 hours away from home. I was ecstatic. I couldn't wait to leave the toxic environment, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a chance at independence. I didn't have much money saved up, so I applied for a student loan and got a small part-time job to help cover expenses. I also found a cheap room to rent off campus. On the day I left, my mom told me that she was disappointed in me for wanting to leave. She said I was abandoning her and that she would be lost without me. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just an emotional reaction, but as I was packing the last of my things, she told me I was no longer welcome in her house. She said that if I left for college, I couldn't come back. That if I wanted to live my own life, I had to do it without her. At the time, I thought it was just another one of her manipulative tactics. She'd always been dramatic, so I thought it was something she'd get over once I settled into college. But no, she didn't speak to me for months after I left. I tried calling her a few times to check in, but she wouldn't answer, and when she did, she would yell at me for breaking up the family. I was devastated, but I kept going with my studies and made the best out of my situation. I got through college, and things got better for me. I made new friends, found a good job after graduation, and was able to live on my own. Now, fast forward 10 years. I've had limited contact with my mom over the years, but every few months she would reach out, sometimes apologizing for how things went down, sometimes blaming me for breaking the family apart. She would always tell me how hard her life had been and how she was struggling, which I always felt bad about, but I was also still hurt by the way she treated me when I left. We never really talked about what happened. She'd just drop a random text or email, and I'd respond out of guilt or because I still hoped we could repair things. But it never got better. A couple of months ago, I got a phone call from my mom. She told me that she had been evicted from her apartment due to financial trouble and that she needed a place to stay. Her request was simple. Could she move in with me until she got back on her feet? She promised it would only be temporary and that she'd pay rent once she found a job. I felt guilty, but at the same time, I was very hesitant. I've worked hard to build the life I have now, and my home is my sanctuary. I don't live in a huge place, and I value my privacy. I didn't think having my mom in my space for an indefinite period would be healthy for either of us, especially considering how things ended with her when I was 18. I tried to be kind, but firm in my response. I told her that I couldn't offer her a place to live, and that I understood it was a difficult situation, but I had boundaries I needed to maintain for my own mental health. I also told her that I wasn't sure how long her situation would last, and I didn't think I could handle that level of stress in my home. She flipped out. She called me selfish, said I didn't care about family, and accused me of abandoning her all over again. She said I had no compassion and that I was just like my dad, who also didn't care about her. She said she raised me and did everything for me, and now I was turning my back on her when she needed me the most. It was harsh, and I was shocked at how quickly things escalated. I tried to stay calm, but I honestly didn't know what to say. It's been a long time since I've been in contact with her this much, and her words stung. I didn't want to help her, but I knew from experience that it wouldn't end well if I let her move in with me. The last time she was in my life like that, it almost destroyed my mental health, and I didn't want to go back to that. I didn't want to be in a position where I was emotionally manipulated again or have her create drama in my life. Since then, she sent me a couple of angry text messages calling me ungrateful and saying I'm just like everyone else who has moved on from her. A few relatives have reached out, saying I should reconsider and let her stay with me since family comes first. They've told me that I'm being too hard on her, and I should just be there for her during a tough time. Some have said that I should have learned from my past mistakes and not repeat the cycle of rejection. Now I'm really torn. I don't want to be the person who turns my back on my mom when she's in need, but I also can't ignore the emotional and mental toll that her presence in my life has had in the past. I feel like I'm caught between guilt and self-preservation, and I don't know if I'm being too harsh by refusing to let her stay with me. AITA for refusing to let my mom live with me after she kicked me out when I was 18. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more awesome videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. Thanks for your support. AITA for calling off my engagement after my fiancé gave my childhood friend an ultimatum to stop being in my life. I, 28F, have been with my fiancé, Alex, 30M, for 3 years now. We've been through a lot together, navigating work stresses, family drama, and the general ups and downs of life. But recently, I've been feeling like things are shifting in ways that I didn't expect, and it all came to a head in the most painful way possible. I've been best friends with Rachel, 29F, since we were kids. We met in elementary school and have been inseparable ever since. We've gone through everything together: graduations, breakups, new jobs, marriages, and everything in between. We've had our fair share of disagreements, but we've always supported each other no matter what. Rachel has been like a sister to me, and I trust her more than anyone else in my life. When Alex and I first started dating, I made it clear to him how important Rachel was to me. I introduced them to each other early on, and they seemed to get along just fine. There were a few awkward moments, like when Alex didn't really understand why I'd spend hours on the phone with Rachel or why we'd go on weekend trips together, but he never really voiced any concerns. I assumed he was fine with the dynamic. The trouble started about a year ago. Rachel was going through a rough patch in her personal life. Her long-term relationship ended unexpectedly, and she was struggling to adjust. She was really leaning on me during this time, and I was there for her in every way I could be, whether it was staying up late to talk, helping her move, or just keeping her company when she needed a distraction. Alex, on the other hand, was becoming more and more frustrated with how much time I was spending with Rachel. I could see him getting annoyed, but he never really brought it up to me until one night, when everything exploded. It was a Saturday evening, and Rachel and I had planned a girls' night in. We were having pizza, watching movies, and just catching up. I had told Alex earlier in the day that I would be spending the evening with Rachel, but he didn't seem happy about it. Around 9 p.m., Alex called me multiple times, but I didn't answer right away. I was in the middle of a conversation with Rachel, and I didn't think it was urgent. When I finally checked my phone, I saw several text messages and missed calls from Alex. The messages were something along the lines of, "I'm done with this, and I don't know how you can prioritize her over me." I called him back immediately, and we ended up having a huge argument. He was upset because I was constantly putting Rachel first, and that he felt like he was being ignored for her. I tried to explain that I couldn't just abandon my best friend when she needed me, but Alex didn't seem to care. He said that he was tired of competing for my attention with Rachel, and that he needed to come first. I was really taken aback by his words. I had never been in a relationship where my partner wanted me to choose between them and my best friend. To me, that seemed like a red flag. I tried to assure him that I loved him and wanted to build a life together, but he seemed fixated on Rachel and how she was taking up too much of my time. He asked if I could at least scale back my friendship with her to make him feel like he was a priority. I refused. I didn't want to cut Rachel out of my life, especially when she was going through such a tough time. Fast forward a few weeks, and Alex came up with an ultimatum. He said he would never be okay with how close Rachel and I were and that I had to make a choice, either in my friendship with Rachel or we were done. He told me that he couldn't marry someone who was so attached to someone else, and that it was a sign of an unhealthy relationship. I was devastated. I couldn't believe that he was asking me to choose between my fiancé and my best friend. At first, I tried to talk him out of it. I tried to explain that Rachel was my sister in everything but blood, and that our friendship was a huge part of who I was. I told him I didn't want to lose him, but I also couldn't give up Rachel. He didn't back down. He said I was selfish for not seeing how this was affecting him and that I was being too close to Rachel for any normal relationship. I spent the next few days in complete turmoil. I didn't know what to do. I love Alex, but I also love Rachel. I felt like I was being torn in two directions, and it felt impossible to reconcile the two. I didn't want to lose either of them, but I also knew I couldn't choose between my fiancé and my best friend. So, after a lot of soul-searching, I called off the engagement. I told Alex that I couldn't marry him under those conditions. I couldn't be with someone who would ask me to sacrifice a lifelong friendship just to make them happy. Alex was furious. He accused me of being immature and incapable of understanding a healthy relationship. He said I was choosing a friendship over the person I was supposed to marry and that I was too wrapped up in the past to build a future with him. I tried to explain that I wasn't choosing Rachel over him. I just couldn't live with an ultimatum like that. But he didn't see it that way. Since then, I've been getting mixed feedback from friends and family. Some people think I made the right decision because relationships should be built on trust and mutual respect, not on controlling behavior. Others think I overreacted and that I should have just compromised a little bit to keep the peace. My family is divided too. Some say Alex was being unreasonable, while others think that my attachment to Rachel is a problem in itself. I feel lost. I miss Alex, but I also feel like I did the right thing. I don't want to be with someone who doesn't respect the people I care about. But at the same time, I wonder if I should have tried harder to find a middle ground. I'm also worried about how this will affect my relationship with Rachel. She's been so supportive through all of this, but I don't want her to feel like she's responsible for me losing Alex. AITA for calling off my engagement after my fiancé gave my childhood friend an ultimatum to stop being in my life. AITA for not wanting to attend my brother's wedding because of his fiancé's toxic behavior toward me. I, 30F, have a younger brother, David, 27M, who is getting married in a few months to his fiancée, Emma, 26F. I want to start by saying that I love my brother. We've had our ups and downs, but I've always tried to be there for him, and we have a strong bond. However, ever since David started dating Emma, I've had a really hard time with her, and it's gotten to the point where I'm not sure I can even attend their wedding. Let me give you some context. When David introduced us to Emma a few years ago, I was really excited to meet her. He'd been dating her for a while, and he seemed really happy. At first, she was perfectly pleasant, charming, sweet, and seemed like she genuinely cared about him. But after a few months, I started noticing some behaviors that made me uncomfortable. Emma would make little comments here and there about me, mostly about my appearance. For example, when we were all out at a family dinner, she said I looked a little tired and could probably use a good skincare routine. It wasn't just that one time either. She'd make these backhanded comments often, and at first, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I told myself it was just her being honest or playful, but eventually, it started bothering me. The real turning point came during a family gathering last year. We were having a casual barbecue at my parents' house, and Emma started talking about wedding planning. I was genuinely interested and asked if she needed any help or advice. She immediately shot me down, saying, "Well, I wouldn't expect someone like you to have much to offer, considering you've never been married." I was taken aback. I've been in a long-term relationship, and while I've never been married, I don't think that makes me incapable of offering advice or simply being a supportive sister-in-law. That comment stung, and I decided to let it go, not wanting to create any tension. But over the next few months, Emma's behavior toward me became increasingly passive-aggressive. She'd make snide remarks about my job, my home, my relationship, and my lifestyle in general. The worst part was how David just seemed to ignore it. Every time I'd bring it up to him, he'd brush it off and tell me that Emma didn't mean it like that, or you're being too sensitive. I didn't want to cause problems in their relationship, so I tried to keep the peace. But it became clear that David was more aligned with Emma's perspective than mine. Things reached a boiling point a few weeks ago when David asked me to be a bridesmaid in the wedding. I was honestly shocked because of how bad things had gotten between Emma and me. But I also didn't want to say no outright because I love my brother and I didn't want to make him feel like I was rejecting him. However, I made it clear to David that I wasn't sure I was comfortable being in the wedding party, given the tension. He assured me that Emma had no issues with me and that everything would be fine, so I reluctantly agreed to be a bridesmaid. The next week, Emma called me to discuss the wedding details. During the conversation, she casually said, "Oh, and by the way, I don't think I can have someone like you standing next to me in the wedding photos. You're just not what I imagined when I thought of my bridal party." She continued by saying that if you could lose a few pounds and maybe put in more effort with your outfits, I'd consider keeping you in the bridal party. I was speechless. I didn't know how to respond. The sheer audacity of what she said hit me like a ton of bricks. I had never been so humiliated in my life. I've always had body insecurities, and while I'm not overweight, I'm not exactly the skinny type either. I've never been made to feel ashamed of my body by my family, and certainly not by my future sister-in-law. I was so upset that I ended the call without saying much, and I called David immediately afterward. I told him exactly what Emma had said and how hurt I was. David responded by saying, "You know, Emma, she's just blunt sometimes. I'm sure she didn't mean to hurt your feelings." I tried to explain that what she said was incredibly hurtful and rude, but David's response was basically to minimize it, telling me that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. At this point, I felt completely unsupported. Not only was Emma treating me terribly, but my brother wasn't standing up for me. I decided then that I couldn't continue to be a part of the wedding in any capacity. I told David that I wouldn't attend the wedding at all unless Emma apologized for her comments, and unless he made it clear that her behavior was unacceptable. I explained that I didn't want to be in a situation where I felt completely disrespected, especially in front of a large group of people. David was furious. He called me dramatic and accused me of ruining the entire wedding. He said that I was making it all about me and that I was being selfish. He told me that Emma was the one he was marrying, and I needed to learn to accept her as part of the family. He said I was being unreasonable and that I needed to stop making everything so personal. I haven't spoken to David much since then, and I'm still undecided on whether I should attend the wedding or not. Part of me wants to stand my ground and not put myself in a position where I'm constantly disrespected. Another part of me feels incredibly guilty. I love my brother, and I don't want to be the reason their wedding is ruined. But at the same time, I don't think it's right to allow someone to treat me like this and still act like everything is fine. I've been getting advice from some of my friends and family. Some say I should just let it go, attend the wedding for the sake of peace, and try to be the bigger person. Others think I'm completely justified and that David and Emma are both in the wrong. I'm torn because, on one hand, I know I deserve respect, but on the other, I don't want to cause unnecessary drama. AITA for not wanting to attend my brother's wedding because of his fiancé's toxic behavior toward me. AITA for refusing to let my best friend bring her toddler to my child-free wedding. I, 27F, am getting married to my fiancé, Max, 30M, in a few months. We've been planning our wedding for over a year now, and one of the most important aspects of our celebration is that we've decided to have a child-free wedding. We made this decision for several reasons. Our venue has a strict no-children policy. We wanted to keep the guest list manageable, and honestly, we just didn't want the added stress of worrying about kids during such an important day. We communicated this early on to all of our guests, and everyone has been on board, except for one person. My best friend, Lily, 28F. Lily and I have been best friends since we were in high school. We've been through a lot together, and she's truly like a sister to me. Over the years, we've had countless heart-to-heart talks, celebrated each other's milestones, and supported one another through all kinds of ups and downs. I've always been there for her, especially through the challenging times in her life. So, when she had her son, Ben, 3, a few years ago, I was ecstatic for her. I've always been supportive of her as a mother, even though I've never been particularly great with kids myself. Since Ben was born, things have changed a lot in our friendship. Lily has become more focused on her child, as she should, but it's impacted our ability to hang out like we used to. I completely understand that, and I've made an effort to still be a good friend to her, whether it's going out of my way to visit her or offer to babysit when she needs a break. I've tried to be flexible and supportive, even though my relationship with her has naturally shifted. When I sent out the wedding invitations, I included a note explaining that we were having a child-free wedding. This was clearly stated, as I wanted to avoid any misunderstandings. I also wanted to ensure that our guests had the opportunity to make arrangements ahead of time for childcare if necessary. Most of our guests were completely fine with this, and a few made the necessary arrangements without any issues. However, when I spoke to Lily about the wedding and mentioned the child-free policy, she got very upset. She told me that she couldn't attend the wedding unless Ben was allowed to come. She said that she couldn't find anyone to watch him and that she didn't feel comfortable leaving him with a babysitter for the entire evening, especially since he was still very attached to her. I tried to explain that this was a policy I couldn't change, as we had set a firm boundary about the child-free nature of the event. I told her that I would miss her, but I couldn't make an exception for just one person, especially because the rule applied to everyone. Lily then became very emotional and told me that I was being selfish and inconsiderate. She said she had already made so many sacrifices for me in the past, and that I should understand how difficult it was for her as a mother. She pointed out that I had no children, so I wouldn't understand the struggles of trying to find someone reliable to care for a toddler. I reassured her that I did understand the challenges of parenting, but that didn't change the fact that I had a vision for my wedding, and part of that vision was a child-free celebration. At this point, Lily suggested that she could bring Ben, but that he wouldn't cause any trouble. She promised that he would be on his best behavior and wouldn't disrupt the ceremony or reception. I told her that it wasn't about whether or not her child would behave. It was about sticking to the decision we had made for the wedding. I also pointed out that I couldn't make exceptions for her, as it would be unfair to the other guests. If I allowed her child to come, it would open the door for others to make the same request, and I didn't want to deal with the stress of having to explain why some children were allowed but others weren't. Lily didn't take this well at all. She became angry and started accusing me of not valuing our friendship. She said that if I was truly her best friend, I would understand that she couldn't attend without Ben. She also told me that this was the final straw in our friendship, and that if I chose my wedding over her and her child, it would be a betrayal she wouldn't forget. I tried to explain that I wasn't choosing my wedding over her, but that this was a boundary I had set and I couldn't compromise on it. I thought we had always respected each other's boundaries, but she didn't seem to see it that way. We haven't spoken much since that conversation. Lily stopped responding to my texts and has made it clear through mutual friends that she's extremely hurt by my decision. I'm feeling incredibly conflicted because I love Lily, and I hate that our relationship is being tested over this. At the same time, I'm firm in my belief that I'm not being unreasonable. I've worked hard to plan this wedding, and I want it to be the way I envision it. I don't want to be put in a position where I'm bending the rules for one person, especially when it comes to something as important as my wedding day. I've been talking to other friends and family about it, and the general consensus is divided. Some people agree with me and think I'm doing the right thing by standing my ground. They say that Lily should respect my wishes and that having a child-free wedding is a reasonable decision. Others think I'm being too rigid and that I should make an exception for my best friend. They feel like I'm putting my wedding above our friendship and that it's just one child in a room full of adults. I keep going back and forth in my head, questioning if I should have been more accommodating or if I should have just let Lily bring Ben. But at the end of the day, I'm worried that if I let her break the rule, it will cause problems with other guests and set a precedent I'm not comfortable with. I also don't want to be guilted into changing my wedding plans just to make one person happy. So, AITA for refusing to let my best friend bring her toddler to my child-free wedding? AITA for going no contact with my sister after she accused me of stealing her life? I, 30F, have an older sister, Emily, 34F, who I've always been very close to. Growing up, we were best friends. We shared everything from clothes to secrets and spent almost every day together. Our bond was unbreakable, or so I thought. But recently, our relationship has completely fallen apart, and I'm starting to question whether I've been in the wrong. To give you some context, I've always admired my sister. She was the person I looked up to, and she helped guide me through many important moments in my life. I watched her navigate relationships, school, and work, and I was proud of everything she accomplished. But as I got older, I started noticing that she didn't handle change very well, especially when it came to me. In the past few years, things started to shift. I started advancing in my career, something I had worked really hard for, and my personal life started to improve. I met a wonderful guy, Alex, 32M, and we've been dating for over a year now. We recently moved in together, and I couldn't be happier with how things are going. I thought Emily would be happy for me, as she always encouraged me to pursue my dreams, but she didn't seem to share the same excitement. It all started when I got promoted at work. I had been working for the same company for nearly 5 years and had been steadily moving up the ranks. When I received a promotion that involved a significant pay increase and more responsibility, I was thrilled. I called Emily to tell her, expecting her to share in my excitement, but her reaction was completely different from what I anticipated. Instead of being happy for me, she said, "Well, I guess someone has to get promoted, but don't get too ahead of yourself." I tried to brush it off, but it stung a little. Over the next few months, I noticed Emily's behavior becoming more passive-aggressive. She would make comments like, "It must be nice to have everything handed to you," or "I'm surprised they promoted you instead of someone with more experience." I was shocked. I thought I had always been supportive of her, and I couldn't understand why she seemed so resentful of my success. It didn't stop there. When Alex and I started discussing moving in together, Emily made it clear she didn't approve. She said that I was rushing into things and that I should slow down and think about what I'm doing. I was hurt by her response, as I had always considered her opinion important, but I didn't let it stop me. Alex and I were happy, and that was what mattered. Then, things got even worse. Emily and her husband, Ben, 36M, had been trying for a baby for a couple of years but had been struggling with infertility. I knew this had been a difficult time for her, and I had always tried to offer emotional support. But when Alex and I found out I was pregnant a few months ago, things really started to unravel. I hadn't planned on announcing the pregnancy yet, but Emily found out through a mutual friend, and when I spoke to her about it, she was furious. She accused me of stealing her life and taking the spotlight away from her and Ben. I was completely blindsided. She told me that her infertility struggle had been the hardest thing she had ever gone through, and now I was rubbing it in her face by getting pregnant when she couldn't. I tried to explain that I didn't want to hurt her, but Emily refused to listen. She told me I was being selfish and that I should have waited until after she had a baby to announce my pregnancy. Things only escalated after that. She stopped speaking to me for several weeks, and when we finally had a conversation, it was clear that she felt like I had betrayed her. She said I was trying to outdo her by getting promoted at work, moving in with Alex, and now having a baby. She told me that she couldn't handle seeing me succeed while she was struggling, and that it felt like I was constantly trying to one-up her in every aspect of my life. I was devastated. I had never intended to make Emily feel less than, and I had never been competitive with her. But it seemed like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. She accused me of taking away her moment and said that I was always making everything about myself. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to overshadow her, but the conversation quickly turned into a shouting match, with her saying things like, "You've always been the golden child, and now you're just rubbing it in my face." I was hurt and confused, but I didn't know how to fix things. After that conversation, I felt like I had tried everything to repair our relationship. I apologized for anything I had done to hurt her and told her that I wanted to support her in every way possible. But Emily refused to listen. She started telling our family members that I was trying to make everything about me and that I had stolen her spotlight. She also started avoiding family gatherings, and when I showed up to one of our family dinners a few weeks ago, she refused to speak to me. I finally reached a breaking point when I received a text from her last week, saying, "I don't want to be around you anymore. I can't stand seeing you succeed while I'm stuck in this miserable place. Don't contact me unless you're ready to admit you've been selfish and take responsibility for ruining my life." At that moment, I decided I couldn't keep trying. I knew I had done nothing wrong, but it felt like Emily was determined to make everything about her. I've given her space and time to process everything, but her behavior has only gotten worse. I'm now considering going no contact with her because I can't keep living in this toxic dynamic. I've tried to be a supportive sister, but I can't keep walking on eggshells around someone who's so angry at me for things that aren't in my control. My family is divided. Some people think I should just apologize, even though I don't feel I've done anything wrong. Others think I've done all I can and that it's time for Emily to take responsibility for her actions. I'm torn because I never wanted to lose my sister, but I'm not sure how much more I can take. So, AITA for going no contact with my sister after she accused me of stealing her life. AITA for telling my brother's girlfriend the truth about his miracle recovery. My 29M, younger brother Jake 27M, has always been the golden child. He was the baby of the family, and my parents doted on him. I was expected to be the responsible one, while Jake got away with everything. It wasn't just little things, either. He lied, manipulated, and skated through life without consequences. When we were kids, Jake would break something, blame me, and I'd be punished. In high school, he got caught cheating on a test, and somehow I was accused of setting a bad example. When I moved out for college, I thought I was finally free of the constant blame, but Jake found ways to pull me back in. The worst of it started when Jake developed a mysterious, chronic illness in his early 20s. He suddenly became too weak to work, had unexplainable pain, and claimed he couldn't even do basic chores. My parents, of course, went into full caretaker mode. They paid his rent, bought his groceries, and even did his laundry. Meanwhile, he sat at home gaming all day. Every doctor he saw either found nothing wrong or suggested it was anxiety-related, but Jake milked the sympathy for all it was worth. I didn't buy it. I had seen him fake sick before, like in high school when he pretended to have the flu to get out of a test, but was caught at a party that same night. But my parents refused to hear it. They told me I was cruel and jealous of the attention he got. So, I stopped arguing. If they wanted to throw money at him, that was their business. Then came Lauren. Lauren, 25F, is Jake's new girlfriend. She's sweet, kind, and the first real relationship he's had. They met online, and because of his illness, their relationship was mostly long-distance at first. She took everything he said at face value and believed he was struggling with a serious, mysterious condition. Eventually, she moved to our city to be with him. Here's where it gets interesting. Right after Lauren moved in, Jake made a miraculous recovery. Suddenly, he could run errands, clean, and even pick up part-time work. He told everyone that love healed him and that Lauren's support had given him the strength to overcome his illness. My parents were overjoyed, praising Lauren like she was some kind of angel sent from above. I was furious, not because Jake got better, but because I knew he was never sick to begin with. He scammed my parents out of years of financial support and played the victim for sympathy. But again, I held my tongue. If they wanted to keep believing his nonsense, so be it. Then last week, Lauren and I had a real conversation for the first time. She mentioned how happy she was that Jake had gotten through the worst of it. I couldn't help myself. I asked her if she ever wondered why his condition disappeared the moment she moved in. She looked confused, so I told her the truth. I explained how Jake had never been diagnosed with anything, how every doctor found nothing wrong, and how he'd conveniently been too sick to work until he had someone else around to help him. She went pale and got really quiet. Then she said, "That actually makes a lot of sense. I thought that was it." But later that night, all hell broke loose. Jake called me screaming that I ruined his life. Apparently, Lauren confronted him, and he doubled down, calling me a liar. But when she asked for medical records or proof of his condition, he had nothing. She left. Now my parents are furious with me, saying I've destroyed Jake's relationship and that I should have kept my mouth shut. They even hinted that if Lauren leaves for good, it'll be my fault that Jake relapses and loses his progress. I told them he wouldn't relapse because he was never sick to begin with. That didn't go over well. Now, I'm getting guilt-tripped from every direction, with Jake saying I took away the best thing in his life, and my parents saying I don't understand unconditional love. I don't think I did anything wrong. Lauren deserved to know the truth. But now I'm wondering, AITA? AITA for refusing to let my mom move in with me after she cut me off financially and emotionally for years? I, 29F, am in a situation with my mom, 54F, that I never thought would happen. I've been living independently for the last few years and have built a life that I'm proud of. I've worked hard for everything I have, including the house I've recently bought with my own savings. I've been incredibly independent, and while I don't have a perfect relationship with my mom, we've managed to stay in touch. The backstory is a bit complicated. Growing up, my mom and I had a strained relationship. She was never very emotionally available, and my dad wasn't in the picture, so I ended up learning how to be self-sufficient at a young age. I took care of my own needs, schoolwork, and even tried to manage things at home since my mom would often be absent, emotionally and physically. She struggled with depression, which she never really addressed, and I don't blame her for it. but it definitely created distance between us. As I grew older, the emotional neglect turned into financial neglect. My mom, who had a decent job, never really supported me when I started making plans for my future. I remember trying to apply for college scholarships, and instead of helping me, she would tell me things like, "You'll figure it out," or "I can't afford to help you." I worked several jobs during college to pay for my tuition and living expenses, and despite my successes, I rarely received any encouragement or support from her. Fast forward to my adult years, and my mom's emotional unavailability turned into full-blown emotional manipulation. She would call me crying about how I was the only one she had left, but would often make me feel guilty for living my own life. Whenever I made plans or achieved something, she'd bring up how hard her life was and how she had no one to lean on. She would never ask how I was doing, but would always expect me to drop everything to help her or listen to her complain about her life. When I graduated college and started my career, I made a conscious decision to distance myself emotionally from my mom. I didn't want to be dragged into the constant drama and negativity. I started setting boundaries with her, and that's when things started to escalate. She accused me of abandoning her and would guilt-trip me during every conversation. She made me feel selfish for having my own life and for not taking care of her the way she wanted me to. Eventually, I stopped answering her calls as frequently and minimized our interactions. This leads me to the present situation. About 6 months ago, my mom reached out and said she was having trouble with her living situation. She told me that her landlord was selling the property she was renting, and she needed to find a place to stay. I immediately felt for her, but I also knew she had made some poor decisions in her life that led her to this point. She had never saved enough money, and her work situation was unstable because of her inability to maintain jobs due to her depression and emotional outbursts. After she mentioned that she had no place to go, she asked if she could stay with me temporarily. At first, I told her I would think about it, but after a few days of thinking, I realized I couldn't do it. I've worked so hard to build my life, and I've spent years putting emotional distance between us because of her manipulation and emotional baggage. I was terrified that if she moved in, it would undo all the progress I've made in creating a peaceful and stable environment for myself. I knew that I would have to give up my independence again, and I just wasn't willing to go back to that. I told her that I couldn't let her move in, and while I felt bad, I explained that I didn't think it would be healthy for either of us. I also reminded her that I had offered help in the past, whether it was financial or emotional, and that she had never taken me up on it. I told her that I wanted to continue being there for her, but I couldn't let her live with me. I suggested that she look into other housing options or maybe find a therapist who could help her navigate her situation. She didn't take it well. She accused me of abandoning her when she needed me the most. She called me selfish and ungrateful, reminding me that she was the one who raised me and how hard her life had been. She also told me that I had forgotten where I came from and that I was too good for her now. I was really taken aback by her reaction, but I stuck to my decision. I told her that I couldn't sacrifice my mental health and well-being for the sake of guilt. Since then, things have been tense between us. She's tried calling me a few times, but I haven't picked up. I've been living my life and focusing on my own needs, but I feel guilty. Part of me feels like I should have just let her move in because she's my mother, and no matter how toxic our relationship has been, I still love her in my own way. But another part of me knows that this would have been a huge step backward for me. I've talked to a few friends and family members about it, and their opinions are divided. Some think I'm right for prioritizing my own mental health and setting boundaries, especially given how manipulative and emotionally exhausting my mom has been. Others think I should have helped her out because family is family, and she's your mother, she raised you. My mom's side of the family has also been calling me to tell me that I should be more compassionate, but I've already given so much of myself to her over the years, and I don't think I have anything left to give. So, AITA for refusing to let my mom move in with me after years of emotional and financial neglect. AITA for refusing to cover for my friend after he lied to his fiancée. I, 30M, have been friends with Matt, 30M, since college. We were roommates back then, and while we had our differences, we always had each other's backs. Matt is the kind of guy who can charm his way out of anything, and over the years, I've seen him lie his way through situations, big and small. Sometimes it was harmless, like calling in sick to work when he just wanted to stay home and play video games. But other times, it was worse. Matt has been engaged to Sarah, 28F, for about a year now. She's great, smart, kind, and way too good for him. She keeps him grounded, and for a while, it seemed like he had finally started growing up. I was genuinely happy for him, and even though we don't hang out as much anymore, I still consider him a close friend. Then about a month ago, Matt called me with a favor. He said he was planning a bachelor party weekend with a few of our old college friends, but he didn't want Sarah to know where they were really going. The official story was that they were doing a quiet cabin retreat upstate, but in reality, they were flying to Vegas. I immediately told him it was a bad idea. Sarah wasn't controlling or unreasonable, but she had made it clear that she didn't like the idea of wild bachelor parties. She had even joked before that if Matt wanted to do one, she'd rather just call off the wedding now and save herself the trouble. Matt had laughed it off at the time, saying he was done with that lifestyle. Now here he was, asking me to lie for him. He wanted me to be his alibi, texting Sarah updates about the fake cabin trip while he was actually in Vegas partying. I refused, telling him that if he had to lie to Sarah about it, maybe he shouldn't be doing it in the first place. He brushed me off, saying it was just a guy thing and that I was being dramatic. I thought that was the end of it. But then, last weekend, Sarah called me. She sounded confused and asked if I had talked to Matt recently. Apparently, she had tried to call him multiple times, but he wasn't picking up. She said she had a weird feeling because his last text seemed off, like someone else had written it. I didn't want to get involved, but I also wasn't going to lie. So, I just said, I think you should ask Matt where he is. That was all it took. Sarah immediately knew something was wrong. She hung up, and I found out later that she started calling around until one of our other friends slipped up and admitted the truth. Matt came back to absolute chaos. Sarah was furious. She wasn't even mad about Vegas itself. She was mad about the lying. She told him if he had just been honest, they could have talked about it. But instead, he made her feel stupid for trusting him. She called off the engagement on the spot. Now Matt is blaming me for everything. He says if I had just played along, none of this would have happened. He says Sarah wouldn't have found out, and even if she did, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. Our mutual friends are split. Some think Matt was an idiot, while others say I should have just covered for him because brothers stick together. Even Sarah reached out to thank me for not lying to her. But now I'm wondering if I really did betray Matt. AITA? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for kicking my friend out after he tried to test my girlfriend. I, 28M, have been dating my girlfriend, Emily, 26F, for a little over a year. We live together, and things have been great. She's kind, smart, and has a good sense of humor, which is important because my friends can be a lot. One of my closest friends, Jason, 29M, has always been skeptical about relationships. He's the kind of guy who thinks most women are gold diggers or manipulative. He's been burned a couple of times, and instead of moving on, he's decided that all women are out to get men. It's exhausting, but we've been friends for years, so I usually just roll my eyes and ignore his rants. A few months ago, Jason hit a rough patch, lost his job, broke up with his girlfriend, and got kicked out of his apartment. He asked if he could crash with me for a bit while he got back on his feet. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I figured that's what friends do. Emily was supportive and agreed, even though she was a little hesitant. At first, things were fine. Jason kept to himself and was actively looking for jobs. But then he started making comments about Emily. Subtle at first, like, she's too good to be true, or are you sure she's not just with you because you have a stable job? I brushed it off, but it was annoying. Then came the test. One night, I was out late finishing up a work project. Emily was home alone, and Jason was there too. Apparently, he decided this was the perfect opportunity to see if she was loyal. Emily told me later that Jason came into the living room and started acting weird. He told her that I had confessed to him that I was thinking of breaking up with her because I felt like I settled. He said that I wasn't sure if I wanted to be with her long term and that I was already talking to other women. Emily, obviously upset, asked him why I hadn't said anything to her. That's when Jason confessed that he had feelings for her and thought she deserved someone who actually appreciated her. He tried to convince her that I was going to leave her eventually, so she might as well be with him instead. Emily thankfully saw right through it. She shut him down immediately and told him to get out of the apartment. When I got home, she was still shaken up and told me everything. I was furious. I confronted Jason, and he had the audacity to say he was just testing her to see if she was trustworthy. He actually thought he was doing me a favor. He said if she was loyal, she'd stay. If not, better to know now. I told him to pack his stuff and get out. He got defensive, saying I was overreacting and that I should be thanking him. When I refused to back down, he left, calling me whipped on his way out. Now, some of our mutual friends are saying I should have given him a chance to explain and that he was just looking out for me. They say he's going through a hard time and I should have handled it differently instead of kicking him out. But as far as I'm concerned, he crossed a massive line. I don't care if he's struggling. He tried to manipulate my girlfriend and sabotage our relationship. I don't see how that's something I should forgive. Still, some people are making me feel guilty. Did I overreact? AITA? AITA for refusing to forgive my friend after she slept with my ex and then lied about it. I, 28F, have a close-knit group of friends, and one of them, Julia, 29F, has been my best friend since college. We've been through a lot together, and we've always had each other's backs. I trusted her completely, and I thought she would always have my best interests at heart. But a recent incident has completely shaken my perception of her, and I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong for refusing to forgive her. The story starts with my ex, Ben, 30M, who I was with for about 3 years. Our relationship was never perfect, but we had a lot of good times together, and we genuinely cared about each other. We had a fairly amicable breakup last year after we both realized that we had grown apart. We ended things without any major drama, and I thought we could remain friends, but I had no interest in getting back together with him. Now, this is where things start to get complicated. Julia and I had always been close, but I never thought there was any tension between her and Ben. They both knew each other from social gatherings, but they were never particularly close. After Ben and I broke up, Julia and I stayed in touch like usual, and we hung out regularly. But about 2 months ago, something happened that I couldn't have predicted. I was at a friend's birthday party, and Julia wasn't there. Ben was, but we weren't talking much, just exchanging pleasantries. Later that night, I started getting drunk and venting to my friend Claire, 31F, about how I still had some unresolved feelings about the breakup. I mentioned that Ben had been sending me texts now and then, and I wasn't sure if he was trying to rekindle things or just wanted closure. Claire said she'd heard some things and encouraged me to talk to Ben more openly, but I wasn't really interested in him in that way anymore. A few days later, Julia asked to meet me for coffee. I didn't think much of it at first, but when we sat down, she seemed distant. I asked if everything was okay, and after some hesitation, she confessed that she had something to tell me. I braced myself for bad news, but never could have predicted what she said next. Julia told me that she had slept with Ben. I froze. At first, I thought I misunderstood her. I asked her to repeat herself, and she said, "I slept with Ben a few weeks ago. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it just did." She claimed that it wasn't intentional, and that she had felt conflicted about telling me. According to her, she had been drinking, and they ended up alone at his place. She said it was nothing serious, just a one-time thing, and that she hadn't told me sooner because she didn't know how to bring it up. I was in complete shock. I felt physically ill, and my first instinct was to just leave, but I couldn't. I asked her how she could do this, especially after everything Ben and I had been through. I had trusted her so much. She kept apologizing and saying it was a mistake, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was just trying to downplay it. I asked her why she hadn't told me sooner, and she said she hadn't wanted to hurt me, but at this point, it felt like it was already too late. The worst part was when she claimed that Ben had told her he was over me and that he had no intention of getting back together with me. She said she believed him when he said that, but I knew Ben better than that. I knew there was no way he would have been that open with her about our past without me hearing about it first, especially after everything we'd been through. It didn't add up. I told her I needed time to process everything, but honestly, I was beyond angry. Not just at Ben for betraying my trust, but at Julia for taking something so private and making it into some casual fling. I spent the next few days completely withdrawing from both of them. I didn't talk to Julia or Ben, and I just tried to figure out what to do. A few days later, I reached out to Ben because I needed answers. When I confronted him, he admitted to what happened but claimed that he didn't think it was a big deal. He said that after our breakup, he was confused and needed closure, and that Julia had been a comfort to him. I told him I didn't want any more excuses and that I had never expected anything like this from him. It felt like he was justifying the entire thing, which made me even angrier. I eventually got around to speaking with Julia again, but I was still furious. I told her that what she had done was unforgivable. She apologized again, but this time it felt less sincere. It was clear to me that she wasn't fully grasping the gravity of what she had done. I explained to her how much I had trusted her, and how she had broken that trust in the worst possible way. She said that she understood why I was hurt but still tried to downplay it, which only made me more upset. Over the next few weeks, I started distancing myself from both Julia and Ben. I didn't want to hear their apologies anymore. I didn't feel like I was being unreasonable for being so hurt, but everyone around me kept telling me that I should move on and forgive them. My friends said that it was just a mistake and that I was overreacting. They said that Julia and Ben both felt really bad about it, and that I should give them another chance. But I just couldn't get past it. I was hurt on so many levels, betrayed by both my ex and my best friend, and also by the fact that they didn't seem to fully understand the impact of what they had done. I wasn't ready to forgive Julia, and I wasn't ready to forgive Ben either. I was at a point where I knew that maintaining any kind of friendship with them would mean completely ignoring my own feelings and letting them walk all over me. So I decided to cut both of them off. I unfriended Julia on social media, blocked Ben's number, and told them both I needed space to heal. It's been a few weeks now, and I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. But now I'm getting messages from our mutual friends telling me that I'm being too harsh and that I should forgive them for the sake of our friendship and past relationship. Some of my friends are even telling me that I should give Julia a chance to explain herself more, but I don't feel like I want to hear it. It feels like they're asking me to let go of my feelings for the sake of their convenience. So, AITA for refusing to forgive my friend after she slept with my ex and then lied about it? AITA for not wanting to forgive my sister for ruining my surprise birthday party and blaming me for it? I, 30F, have an older sister, Emma, 34F, and we've always had a bit of a complicated relationship. Growing up, she was the golden child, popular, always getting praise for her achievements, and the one everyone seemed to focus on. I was always the quiet, less attention-grabbing one, which honestly didn't bother me much, but it did mean I spent a lot of time trying to please others and avoid conflict. Over time, I've learned to stand up for myself, but it hasn't always been easy. For the past few years, I've been living a pretty independent life. I have a stable job, a group of close friends, and a small but cozy apartment that I'm proud of. I'm not a big party person, but for my 30th birthday, I decided I'd like to do something special, especially since I don't always get to see my friends and family as often as I'd like. I told my friends that I wanted a surprise party, something low-key, but with a few of my closest people. I didn't want a huge bash, just a nice dinner and drinks at a local restaurant I love. I made sure to tell my sister Emma about it a few months in advance, so she could be a part of the planning, as we've always coordinated things like this together. However, I knew that with her being so busy with her career, she might not have the time to help, so I wasn't expecting her to take charge or anything. I just wanted her to be there and celebrate with me. A couple of weeks before the party, I started getting a little more excited. I was really looking forward to it, and I assumed everything was going smoothly. I hadn't heard much from Emma about the party, but that was fine. She's always been a bit distant and not super involved in things unless they're really important to her. My friends had been texting me about the plans, asking me for details, and I was thrilled to hear that everything was coming together. The night of the party finally arrived, and I had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. I was out with a couple of friends, getting ready for the surprise, when I got a call from my best friend, Laura. She sounded kind of frantic and asked if I was already on my way to the restaurant. I told her I was still at home, just finishing getting ready, and she asked me to hurry. I thought it was strange because the surprise party wasn't supposed to start for another hour. When I arrived at the restaurant, everything seemed normal at first. I walked in and saw a few of my friends, but the atmosphere felt off. There wasn't the usual buzz of excitement or the loud chatter that comes with a surprise party. In fact, the whole place was oddly quiet. I was confused, but then I saw Emma standing near the bar looking kind of tense. She waved, and I waved back, still thinking it was just the beginning of the party. As soon as I walked closer, though, Emma dropped a bombshell on me. She told me that she had messed up the surprise party. Apparently, she had misunderstood the date, and she had told everyone the wrong time. This resulted in half the guests showing up an hour late, including my best friend Laura, who was freaking out because she'd been trying to call me and tell me about the confusion. I was immediately crushed. It felt like the night I had been looking forward to for months was ruined. I tried to stay calm and make the best of the situation. I sat down with a few friends who had already arrived, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I asked Emma about what happened, and she admitted that she had mixed up the details of the party. I asked if she had called anyone to let them know the updated time, and she said she hadn't really thought to do that. She said she figured it wouldn't be a big deal and that everyone would just show up when they could. Now, I'm not a confrontational person, and I didn't want to make a scene, so I tried to brush it off. But deep down, I was incredibly upset. The whole point of a surprise party is that everyone is supposed to be there when you walk in, and Emma had completely ruined that. It wasn't just a minor mistake. She had messed up the timing in a way that completely threw everything off. But what really hurt was the fact that she wasn't taking any responsibility for it. When the rest of the guests started arriving, Emma turned to me and said, "I'm really sorry, but you know I didn't mean for this to happen. I just thought it would be fine if people came in at different times. Can you just get over it?" I felt my stomach drop. It was like she was completely dismissing how disappointed and hurt I was. She wasn't even apologizing properly. She was just trying to make it seem like it wasn't a big deal. Throughout the night, I couldn't shake my frustration. The party itself was fine. My friends tried to make it fun, and we had some good laughs, but the vibe was off. I kept thinking about how much I had been looking forward to this night, and how Emma had taken that away from me without any real consideration. When I finally went home that night, I tried to talk to her about how I felt. I told her that I was really hurt, and that I needed her to take responsibility for messing up the party. I also told her that I felt like she didn't care about making my birthday special. Instead of apologizing, Emma got defensive. She said that I was overreacting and that I was making it all about me. She told me that I should just be happy that anyone showed up at all, and that I was being ungrateful. She went on to say that I had been expecting too much from her and that it wasn't her fault if people didn't show up on time. At this point, I was so upset that I just couldn't keep talking to her. I told her I needed some space and hung up. Over the next few days, I tried to process everything. I was hurt, but I also didn't want to let this ruin our relationship. I've always tried to be understanding, but Emma's refusal to acknowledge how much she messed up made it impossible for me to just let it go. I ended up telling a few close friends what happened, and they agreed that Emma had handled the situation poorly. They all said that I wasn't wrong to feel upset and that her dismissive attitude wasn't acceptable. But when I tried to talk to Emma again, she was still defensive and insisted that I was the one causing drama. She said that she wasn't going to apologize because she didn't see what she had done wrong. She made me feel like I was being a burden by asking her to take responsibility for her actions. At this point, I'm considering cutting her off for a while. I've always tried to be understanding and patient with her, but I don't feel like I'm getting the same in return. I don't want to cut her out of my life, but I also don't want to keep being the one to always forgive and move on when she doesn't acknowledge the hurt she causes. So, AITA for refusing to forgive my sister for ruining my surprise birthday party and blaming me for it. AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding after he disinvited my fiancée. I, 29M, have a brother, Luke, 31M, who's always been close to me. We grew up in a very tight-knit family, and we've always had each other's backs. However, over the years, I've noticed that Luke has become more and more controlling and has a tendency to expect people to just go along with his demands. Despite this, I've never really called him out on it. I always try to keep the peace in our family, even if it sometimes means putting my own needs aside. Recently, Luke got engaged to his longtime girlfriend, Sarah, 30F. Sarah is a lovely person, but ever since their engagement, I've started noticing some red flags when it comes to how she treats people in our family. She's always been polite, But I've observed her becoming more possessive of Luke, and it feels like she's trying to push people out of his life, especially those who might take attention away from her. I've never said anything about it to Luke, though. I've just kept my distance, and I've tried to be supportive. The issue began when I got engaged to my girlfriend, Olivia, 28F. Olivia and I have been together for 3 years, and we've been living together for a while now. I love her deeply, and I know she's the one for me. Naturally, I was excited to announce our engagement to our families, including Luke and Sarah. I thought it would be a joyous occasion, but things quickly became tense. When I told Luke about my engagement, his first reaction was more neutral than I expected. He congratulated me, but then immediately asked when we were planning to get married. I told him that we hadn't set a date yet because we wanted to enjoy the engagement for a while and not rush into anything. This seemed to irritate him, but I brushed it off. He made a comment about how it would be nice if we could avoid clashing dates with his wedding, which I didn't think was too big of a deal at the time. As we moved forward with our wedding plans, I realized that the situation was getting more complicated. Luke and Sarah had decided on a wedding date that was only 6 months away, and I had already started discussing dates for our wedding with Olivia. We hadn't nailed down a specific date yet, but we were looking at the same time frame as Luke and Sarah. I wasn't trying to step on anyone's toes, but I also didn't want to wait too long to marry Olivia. It wasn't about competing with Luke's wedding. It was just that it worked out with our schedules. When I brought this up to Luke, he immediately became defensive. He told me that it would be too confusing for our family to have 2 weddings so close together, and that I should consider postponing mine so it wouldn't overshadow his. I tried to explain that it wasn't about competing with him, but he wasn't having it. He insisted that it was disrespectful to schedule our wedding so close to his and that we should move it further down the line. He said that he didn't want anyone distracted from his big day, especially our parents, who had already committed to traveling for his wedding. I was taken aback by this. Luke has always been a little possessive about his big events, but this felt different. I explained that I didn't want to postpone my own life for his, and that it wasn't about overshadowing him. It was about celebrating with the people we love. He got more upset, saying that family comes first and that I needed to get my priorities straight. It didn't sit well with me, but I tried to let it go. I decided to go ahead with our wedding plans and kept it to a simple ceremony, hoping that Luke would come around. Then came the invite. About 2 months before Luke's wedding, I received an invitation in the mail for his and Sarah's wedding. I opened it with some excitement, but as I read the details, I noticed that there was no mention of Olivia. At first, I thought it was an oversight, so I called Luke to ask about it. He immediately gave me a cold response, telling me that Olivia wasn't invited because Sarah and I just felt it would be best. I was stunned. I asked him why she wasn't invited, and he said, "We've decided to keep it small with just family and close friends, and we don't know Olivia that well." I told him that Olivia had been a part of my life for 3 years and had attended family gatherings, holidays, and events. I was shocked that he would leave her out of something as important as his wedding. Luke's response was dismissive. He said, "I know it might seem hurtful, but it's just the way we've chosen to do things." When I asked if he was serious, he said he didn't want any drama, and that it would be awkward to have her there, especially with Sarah's family being so involved in the planning. I could tell he was just repeating things Sarah had said, and it made me feel like he was prioritizing her comfort over my feelings. I was upset, but I tried to keep my composure. I told Luke that I wouldn't be attending his wedding unless Olivia was invited. I didn't want to make a scene, but I wasn't going to go to his wedding and leave the most important person in my life behind. He got angry with me, accusing me of making it all about me and my drama. He said that I was being unreasonable and that I needed to let it go. I stood firm and told him that if Olivia wasn't invited, I wouldn't attend and I wouldn't support the wedding. At that point, he hung up on me. A few days later, I received a text from Luke saying that he and Sarah had discussed it and that he had decided to disinvite me from the wedding because I was making things difficult. He told me that if I couldn't accept their decision about Olivia, I wasn't welcome at the wedding, and that it would be better for everyone if I just stayed home. I was devastated. Not only was I being asked to choose between my brother and my fiancé, but Luke was acting like this was my fault. I felt completely blindsided. Olivia and I had talked about it, and we both agreed that if he couldn't respect our relationship, We didn't want to be a part of his big day anyway. But the fact that he took it to the level of completely disinviting me felt like a betrayal. I've been getting messages from my parents trying to convince me to let it go and make peace with Luke, but I'm struggling with the idea of just letting this slide. It's not about the wedding itself. It's about the principle of it. I don't understand how my brother could treat me like this over something as basic as inviting the woman I love to his wedding. Now, I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong here. I understand that weddings are stressful and that Sarah might have her own ideas about guest lists, but I just feel like I'm being treated like my relationship with Olivia doesn't matter. So, AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding after he disinvited my fiancée? AITA for refusing to help my sister financially after she asked me to support her and her family during her husband's job loss? I, 32F, have an older sister, Kate, 36F, who has always been very independent. Growing up, she was the one who excelled academically, always had a solid career trajectory, and managed to keep everything together. I always admired her, but as we got older, I noticed that she tended to take on a lot of responsibility in her personal life and often expected others to step in when things went wrong. I didn't mind this so much at first because I wanted to be there for her, but as time went on, I started to feel like she was taking advantage of my willingness to help. A few years ago, Kate married Mark, 38M, who at the time seemed like a good match for her. Mark was funny, charismatic, and supportive, and they had a child together not long after they got married, a son named Ethan, 3. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. They both had good jobs, a nice house, and seemed to have their lives in order. However, about a year ago, Mark lost his job. He had been working for a tech company that had to lay off a significant portion of its staff, including him. I could tell Kate was struggling with it at first, but she didn't ask for help right away. She was determined to make things work on her own. I admired her for that, but I also knew that it was only a matter of time before she reached out for financial support. Kate has never been one to ask for help unless she absolutely needs it. But when she does ask, it's usually because she's in a tough spot and has exhausted all other options. The real issue started when Kate reached out to me a few months ago. She called me one evening, sounding stressed. She explained that Mark still hadn't found a new job and that they were struggling financially. I was sympathetic, of course, but what she said next threw me off completely. She asked me if I could help cover their bills for a few months until Mark found a new job. She mentioned that she had some savings, but they were rapidly dwindling, and they had a mortgage, childcare expenses, and other bills piling up. At first, I didn't know how to respond. I understand that unexpected situations happen, and I wanted to be there for her, but I also had my own financial responsibilities. I'm married to my husband, Tom, 34M, and while we're comfortable, we're not exactly swimming in money. We have a mortgage, student loans, and other expenses, just like most people. I also have 2 children of my own, and as much as I love Kate, I have to prioritize my own family. I told Kate that I was sorry to hear what she was going through and that I wished I could help, but I just didn't have the financial resources to cover her bills. I explained that Tom and I were also tightening our budget because of some upcoming expenses, and it wasn't something we could afford at this time. Kate didn't take it well. She got quiet on the phone and then said, "I understand, but I just thought you'd be more willing to help. You know we've always supported each other, and I've always been there for you." Her words stung a little, but I tried to stay calm and told her that I wasn't trying to be unsupportive. I told her I'd be happy to help in other ways, like offering advice on job hunting or helping with childcare if she needed a break, but I just couldn't give her the money she was asking for. After a few minutes of silence, Kate said she understood and ended the call. The next week, I started hearing more from Kate. She reached out to me again, and this time, she was even more desperate. She said that things had only gotten worse since we last spoke. Mark hadn't been able to find a job, and they were falling behind on their mortgage payments. Kate was starting to feel like she was drowning. She asked me again if I could help, but this time, she was more specific. She said that even a small amount would make a difference, just enough to cover a few bills until Mark found something stable. She assured me that it was only temporary and that they'd pay me back as soon as Mark got a new job. I felt torn. On the one hand, I understood the pressure she was under, and I hated hearing about her struggles. On the other hand, I had already made it clear that I couldn't afford to give her money. I explained once again that my financial situation hadn't changed and that I couldn't risk jeopardizing my own family's security. I also mentioned that I felt like she was relying on me too much instead of finding other ways to solve the problem. I told her she might want to consider asking for a loan from a bank or speaking to a financial advisor for guidance. Kate didn't take that well either. She accused me of being unsupportive and said that it wasn't fair that I had the resources to help but wasn't willing to. She said she didn't understand why I was being so cold-hearted when she had always been there for me in the past. She mentioned that I was her only family who had the means to help, and now I was turning my back on her. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel myself getting frustrated. I explained that it wasn't about not wanting to help her. It was about not being able to afford it. I told her that I didn't have an endless supply of money and that I had to think about the long-term financial stability of my own family. Kate didn't respond for a few days, but when she did, it was clear that she was angry. She sent me a text saying that she couldn't believe I was being so selfish and that she had expected more from me. She said that I was acting like I didn't care about her or her family, and that she would never ask me for help again. That was when I started to feel like I might be in the wrong. I know Kate was going through a tough time, but her reaction to my refusal was over the top. I've always been there for her emotionally, and I've supported her in many other ways. I've helped her with childcare, listened to her vent about her marriage, and given advice when she's needed it. But when it comes to money, I just don't feel like it's something I can give without jeopardizing my own family's well-being. I've been feeling guilty about it ever since. I know Kate is in a tough spot, and I hate that she's struggling, but I also don't think I should be expected to sacrifice my own financial security for the sake of her family. She has other options, and I believe she needs to explore them instead of depending on me. Now, our relationship is strained. We've barely talked since that last exchange, and I'm starting to wonder if I made the wrong choice. I don't want to lose my sister, but I also don't want to be taken advantage of. So, AITA for refusing to help my sister financially after she asked me to support her and her family during her husband's job loss. AITA for not wanting to let my best friend's girlfriend move into my apartment after she got kicked out of her place. I, 28M, have a best friend, James, 29M, who I've known since we were kids. We've always been super close, and I've been through a lot with him over the years. He's the type of person who is loyal to the bone, and I've always appreciated that about him. However, lately, things have gotten a bit complicated with him and his girlfriend, Erica, 27F. I'm in a bit of a tough spot, and I'm trying to figure out if I'm being unreasonable. To give some context, I live in a 2-bedroom apartment that I rent by myself. It's in a decent neighborhood, and I've lived here for about 3 years. The rent is affordable for me, and I've gotten really comfortable with the space. I don't have a roommate, and I'm the type of person who values their privacy and personal space. I also work from home, so having a quiet and private place is really important for me. About a month ago, James and Erica got into a huge fight, and it ended with Erica getting kicked out of her apartment. She had been living with James for about a year, but things got really tense between them, and he ended up telling her to leave. James called me shortly after it happened, asking if I could help Erica out. At first, I was confused and asked him why she couldn't just go stay with family or friends, but he told me that she didn't have anywhere else to go and that she didn't want to go back to her parents' place because things were strained with them. He said that she didn't have any money saved up and was basically homeless for the time being. James begged me to let her crash at my place for a few weeks until she got back on her feet. He assured me it would only be temporary. I was torn. On the one hand, I understand that people go through tough times, and I wanted to help. Erica and I have always gotten along, and I felt bad that she was in this situation. But on the other hand, I wasn't sure I was comfortable with the idea of having someone living with me, especially when it wasn't something I had planned for. I value my space, and the thought of having a guest in my apartment, even temporarily, was a bit overwhelming. I explained to James that I wasn't sure about the idea, but that I would think about it. A few days later, Erica called me to ask if she could stay. She explained how bad the situation had gotten with James, and I could tell she was genuinely stressed out. She promised it would only be for a few weeks, and she even offered to pay me rent or help out around the apartment. She said she didn't want to burden me, but she didn't have many options. I felt bad hearing her situation, and I was still torn. I talked to James again, and he really pushed for it saying that it was a huge favor to him and that it would mean a lot to him if I helped her out. After a lot of back and forth, I agreed to let her stay for a short period. I set some ground rules like no loud parties, no random guests over, and that she would have to keep to herself and respect my space. Erica was really grateful, and I thought everything would be fine. The first few days were okay. Erica mostly kept to herself during the day while I was working, and we had a few casual chats here and there. I didn't mind the arrangement, but I could tell things were starting to get a little awkward. She was spending more time in the apartment, which I expected, but she started leaving her stuff around the apartment, and it was becoming more difficult to maintain the privacy I was used to. I could feel my space starting to shrink, and it was beginning to get to me. About a week in, I realized I wasn't comfortable with the situation anymore. She had started cooking meals for herself in the kitchen, and while that wasn't a huge deal, it did disrupt the flow of my routine. I'm someone who likes to have control over my environment, and the constant presence of someone else in my space was starting to feel intrusive. On top of that, Erica started asking me to do little things for her, like picking up groceries or helping with things that weren't urgent but that she didn't want to do herself. I felt like she was taking advantage of my hospitality, and it was beginning to wear on me. I also started to notice that James wasn't as involved as I expected him to be. He would check in with Erica once in a while, but he wasn't doing much to help her find a new place. Instead, he was spending most of his time with his friends or out doing his own thing, leaving Erica with me more and more. I started to feel like I was doing all the heavy lifting here, and that made me resentful. Erica wasn't contributing to the household at all, despite offering to pay rent. She never brought up any kind of financial contribution again, and it felt like she was just taking advantage of my generosity without doing much in return. A few days ago, I finally snapped. I came home from work to find Erica sitting on the couch, watching TV with the volume up way too loud, while I had told her to keep the noise down earlier. There were dirty dishes everywhere in the kitchen, and the bathroom was a mess. I'd been cleaning up after both of us, because it seemed like she wasn't doing it, even though she was the one who'd been using the space. I told her that I needed her to start pitching in more and to keep the apartment cleaner. I also reminded her that I needed some space to work from home. She apologized, but I could tell she wasn't really taking it seriously. I didn't want to start a huge fight, but I was frustrated and I didn't know how much longer I could handle the situation. The next day, I called James and told him that I didn't think it was working out anymore. I explained that I wasn't comfortable with Erica staying at my place any longer, and that I needed her to find somewhere else to stay. James was shocked and upset. He said I was being unreasonable and that I was kicking her out when she needed help the most. He accused me of not caring about Erica and said that I was being selfish. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not wanting to help, but that I felt like my boundaries were being crossed and I needed my space back. He didn't take it well and told me that I was making things harder for him and Erica and that I should have just been more understanding. Now, I'm feeling guilty. I understand that Erica is going through a tough time, but at the same time, I feel like I have a right to my own space and comfort. I've helped her out, and I don't think I should be expected to sacrifice my peace of mind just because she's going through a difficult situation. I feel like I've been patient and generous, but at this point, it's starting to feel like too much. So, AITA for not wanting to let my best friend's girlfriend move into my apartment after she got kicked out of her place. AITA for kicking my sister and her family out after they took over my house. So, I, 34M, bought my own house about 4 years ago. I worked my ass off for years, saved up, and finally got my own place. It's nothing huge, just a modest 3-bedroom, but it's mine. My younger sister, Rachel, 29F, has always been a bit of a mess when it comes to finances. She's married to Jeff, 32M, and they have 2 kids, 5 and 3. Rachel and Jeff have never been great with money. They're the type of people who live paycheck to paycheck, always upgrading their phones, buying expensive clothes for their kids, eating out constantly, and then wondering why they can't afford rent. Our parents have bailed them out countless times, but last year they finally cut them off. They told Rachel and Jeff they needed to figure things out themselves. Fast forward to 6 months ago, Rachel called me in a panic. They were getting evicted and had nowhere to go. She begged me to let them stay with me for just a couple of months while they got back on their feet. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I also couldn't let my niece and nephew be homeless. So, I agreed, under the condition that they'd pay a small amount for utilities and groceries, and they'd actively work on finding a new place. At first, it was fine. The kids were loud, but I expected that. Jeff promised he'd pick up extra shifts at work, and Rachel said she was looking for a job. But within the first month, problems started piling up. First, they weren't contributing a dime to bills or food. I asked Rachel about it, and she said, "We just need a little more time. Things are really tight." Meanwhile, I'd see them ordering takeout multiple times a week. I try not to be resentful, but I was covering everything while they acted like guests in a hotel. Then Rachel started redecorating my house. Without asking. One day I came home, and she had moved my living room furniture around, saying it had better flow. Another time, I walked into my guest bathroom, and she had replaced my soap and towels with her own to match the theme. The worst was when she put up family photos of her family in my hallway, replacing some of my own pictures. Jeff wasn't much better. He would leave dirty dishes in the sink for days, let the kids trash the place, and take over my TV every evening to watch whatever he wanted. He even tried to make rules for my house, like no shoes inside, even though I've never had that rule, and he insisted I knock before entering my own home office. Then came the final straw. I got home from work one day, and my bedroom door was open. Rachel and Jeff had moved into my room. Their excuse? The kids kept waking up in the middle of the night, and it's easier if they have their own rooms. They had taken all my things, my bed, my clothes, even my nightstand items, and shoved them into my small guest room like I was the guest. I was livid. I told them this was my house, my bedroom, and that they had seriously crossed a line. Rachel had the audacity to say, "But we're family. You have the whole house, and we just needed more space for the kids." I snapped. I told them they had 1 week to get out. I wasn't doing this anymore. No more freeloading, no more taking over my house, no more excuses. Jeff got defensive, saying I was destroying their stability and that I didn't understand what it's like to have kids. Rachel cried, saying I was cruel for kicking out my own family. But I didn't budge. After a lot of drama, they packed up and left, though not without calling me heartless and selfish. Now my parents are mad at me, saying I should have been more patient. But I feel like I gave them 6 months, and they completely took advantage of me. So, Reddit? AITA? AITA for refusing to help my parents financially after they asked me to pay off their debt? I, 30M, have always had a complicated relationship with my parents, but over the years, I've done my best to maintain a civil connection with them. Growing up, we didn't have much money, but I always felt like we were doing okay. My parents worked hard, but they also spent money irresponsibly. I remember my dad often buying things we didn't need, and my mom frequently making impulsive purchases, all while never really budgeting for anything long-term. I grew up in an environment where financial stability was something I had to teach myself, and I always promised myself that I would never make the same mistakes as my parents when it came to money. I graduated college, started my career, and managed to build a pretty stable life for myself. I'm not wealthy, but I have a good job. I'm able to live comfortably, and I've saved up enough for a decent emergency fund. I've worked hard for everything I have, and I'm proud of the financial habits I've developed over the years. About 2 months ago, my parents called me, and I could tell by their voices that something was off. They asked me to come over, and when I arrived, they sat me down and started explaining how bad their financial situation had become. Apparently, they had accumulated a significant amount of debt over the years. Credit card debt, car loans, personal loans, and even some unpaid medical bills. And they were struggling to keep up with payments. My mom explained that they had fallen behind on multiple bills and were facing threats of eviction. My dad chimed in, saying that they had tried to refinance their mortgage and negotiate with creditors, but things were only getting worse. They were asking for help. I was shocked. I knew they had been living paycheck to paycheck, but I didn't realize the extent of the situation. After a long conversation, they asked me if I could help them pay off their debt. My initial response was to say no, but I wanted to hear them out and understand exactly what they were asking for. They explained that they were in a dire financial situation and were unable to get out of it without some major help. They said they had made mistakes and were trying to figure out a way to move forward, but they couldn't do it without assistance. They didn't provide a specific amount, but based on what they told me, I calculated that they likely needed around $30,000 to cover their debts and get caught up on bills. My immediate reaction was to feel overwhelmed. I wasn't prepared to give them that much money, especially since I didn't have that kind of cash lying around. My first instinct was to say no and to offer support in other ways, like helping them budget or find resources to work out a payment plan. But the pressure they put on me was intense. My mom looked at me with pleading eyes, saying she didn't know what they were going to do if I didn't help. My dad, who had always been a proud man, admitted that he had never asked for financial help before, but this situation was too big to ignore. I've always been the responsible one in the family. I managed to avoid the financial mistakes they made, and I've been independent for years. But I also know how hard it is to break out of a financial hole once you're in it. I tried to reason with them, but the more they explained their situation, the more I felt guilty. They said they couldn't get loans anymore because their credit was shot, and they were on the brink of losing their house. They mentioned that if I helped, they would do everything they could to pay me back over time. After a lot of back and forth, I reluctantly agreed to help. But there was a condition. I made it clear that I didn't want them to rely on me again. I told them I was willing to lend them the money to pay off the debts, but they would need to work out a plan to be financially responsible moving forward. They agreed, and I transferred the money to help cover the debts. For the next month, things seemed okay. I didn't expect them to pay me back immediately, but I did expect them to start making better financial decisions. However, as time went on, I began to notice that they were slipping back into old habits. My mom started buying things she didn't need again, new clothes, makeup, and random household items, and I noticed that my dad was still spending money on things that weren't necessary. I tried to talk to them about it, but each time, they brushed me off, saying they were just trying to enjoy life after all the stress they had been through. They seemed to think that because I helped them once, I would always be there to bail them out. At first, I was understanding, thinking that it might take some time for them to adjust to being financially responsible. But as the weeks went on, I became frustrated. I had sacrificed a lot to help them, and it felt like they weren't taking it seriously. They weren't making any real changes to their spending habits, and I began to realize that they were counting on me to be their safety net instead of learning how to manage their finances better. I couldn't help but feel like I was enabling them instead of helping them get out of the cycle of bad financial decisions. A month ago, I had a conversation with them about their progress. I asked them if they had made any plans for how to stay on top of their finances now that I had helped them get out of debt. They didn't seem to have a solid plan, and that's when I started to feel angry. I told them that if they didn't make serious changes, I wasn't going to continue to help them. They got defensive, saying that they were just getting back on their feet and that it would take time to adjust. They even suggested that I might need to lend them more money if they couldn't pay their bills on time. I was furious. I reminded them that I didn't have an endless supply of money and that I had helped them out of my own savings. I told them that they needed to take responsibility for their financial future and stop relying on me. They were upset by my response, and my mom started crying, saying that I was being heartless and that she didn't know what they would do without me. Now, I'm feeling torn. I feel guilty for being so firm with them, but at the same time, I don't want to become their permanent bank. I've done enough, and I've already sacrificed a lot to help them. They're adults, and they need to take control of their own finances instead of depending on me. I'm worried that if I keep helping them, they won't ever learn how to manage their money. So, AITA for refusing to help my parents financially again after I already helped them pay off their debt? AITA for kicking my mom out after she tried to take over my wedding? I, 28F, am getting married in 3 months to my fiancé, Jake, 30M. We've been together for 5 years, and he's an amazing guy. We're both pretty laid-back people, and our wedding was planned to reflect that: small, intimate, and focused on celebrating with the people we love. At least, that was the plan before my mom, 56F, decided it was her wedding to plan. For context, my mom has always been overbearing. She's the type of person who wants things done her way and doesn't handle pushback well. Growing up, she controlled everything: what I wore, who I hung out with, what hobbies I pursued. She even tried to pick my college major, but I put my foot down on that one. Ever since Jake and I got engaged, she's been acting like she's the one getting married. At first, it was small things. She didn't like our color scheme. We chose dark green and gold. She wanted pastel pink and blue. She hated that we weren't getting married in a church, we're having an outdoor ceremony. She kept suggesting we invite way more people than we planned, including relatives I haven't spoken to in years. I was firm but polite, reminding her that it was our wedding and we were keeping it small. She would pout but eventually drop it, until she started taking matters into her own hands. One day, I got a call from our wedding venue, confirming a change to our reservation. Confused, I asked what change they were talking about. Turns out, my mom had called them pretending to be me and requested to increase the guest count from 75 to 150. She even tried to switch our reception meal from the plated dinner Jake, and I chose to a buffet because she thought it was more traditional. I was furious. I called her immediately and asked what the hell she was doing. She brushed it off, saying she just knew I'd regret not inviting more people and that she was helping because I was too busy to think straight. I told her in no uncertain terms that she was not to make any more changes and that if she kept interfering, she wouldn't be involved in the planning at all. She sulked but agreed. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, my cousin called me, congratulating me on finally coming to my senses and letting my mom fix my wedding dress disaster. I had no idea what she was talking about. Turns out, my mom hated the simple, elegant dress I had chosen. She thought it was too plain and that I needed something grand and princess-like. So, she went behind my back and ordered a completely different dress. One of those huge ball gowns covered in rhinestones and lace. She even told the boutique to cancel my original order. I saw red. I called her, absolutely livid, and told her she had no right to do this. She started crying, saying she was just trying to make sure I had the perfect wedding and that I was being ungrateful. She even had the nerve to say, "One day, you'll thank me for making sure you didn't ruin your own wedding." That was the last straw. I told her she was officially uninvited. She wouldn't be coming to the wedding, and she needed to stay out of my life until she could respect my boundaries. She started screaming, saying I was a horrible daughter and that she was just trying to make things special. My dad, who has always been more level-headed, called later, asking if I was sure about this and suggesting I let her back in for the sake of peace. But Jake and I both agreed. We couldn't risk her ruining anything else. Now my family is divided. Some people think I was right to stand my ground, while others think I'm being too harsh. My mom has been telling everyone that I kicked her out of my wedding for caring too much, and some relatives have even said they won't come unless I invite her back. So, Reddit, AITA? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.